And to further analyze the relevance of the forum held in Geneva and the initiatives proposed there, we are joined by David Comissiong, Barbados Ambassador to the Caribbean community and well-known reparations advocate. Welcome, David.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
It's our pleasure to have you here in From the South. So first things first, how would you explain what the Permanent Forum on People of African Descent is, what its mission is, and what its importance?
Well, the United Nations Permanent Forum on People of African Descent is perhaps the newest United Nations entity. It was really born out of the 2001 United Nations World Conference Against Racism. That was a world conference that focused on all aspects of racism, but that conference gave birth to the United Nations Decade for People of African Descent. And one of the positive developments during that decade was the decision of the UN General Assembly to establish this 10-person forum that would focus specifically on issues pertaining to people of African descent and would be a consultative body, particularly to the UN Human Rights Council, to advise on what measures still need to be taken so that people of African descent can get to, the full enjoyment of their rights, and we can combat anti-Black racism.
Now, Mr. Comissiong, you were one of the main proponents to establish a new international special tribunal to seek reparations for transatlantic slavery and its legacies in today's society. What would this entail, and how would you think this would contribute to tackle the challenges that are still experienced in today's society?
Well, I am a member of Barbados's National Task Force on Reparations. I'm actually the deputy chairperson. And since the year 2013, the Caribbean community, CARICOM, has launched a claim for reparations against the governments of Western Europe. Our claim is for reparations for the crimes against humanity of native genocide, that is the genocide of the indigenous people of the Caribbean, and also for the centuries of African enslavement. And so we have targeted 10 Western European countries, and we are saying to them that reparations are owed. And we have been seeking to negotiate a reparations package with them. But thus far, we have not been successful. So if we fail to negotiate, then the next option is the legal option. How do you litigate? And right now, the major international court that would be available to litigate a reparations claim is the International Court of Justice, the ICJ. But the ICJ suffers from two defects, really. Number one, it is not a court that was really designed to handle a case of the complexity and magnitude of a reparations claim for hundreds of years of African enslavement. And secondly, it suffers from the defect that several of the former enslaver nations, if not all of them, even though they signed on to the jurisdiction of the ICJ, they entered reservations to the ICJ treaty stipulating that the ICJ could not adjudicate claims against them for crimes that took place prior to their signing on to the ICJ. So, in other words, the crimes that they committed during the colonial era, the ICJ would not have the jurisdiction to adjudicate those crimes. So, for most of these former enslaver nations, the best that we can do by going to the ICJ would be to ask the ICJ for an advisory opinion declaring that they are guilty and that they do owe reparations. But an advisory opinion is not something that you can enforce. So hence came the idea of why not get the United Nations to establish a new court, a specialized court that would be specifically designed for this particular issue, that is, adjudicating reparations claims, and once the claim has been approved, then quantifying the damage that was done and the type of compensation that has to be paid.
So this third session of the Permanent Forum was held until today, April 19th. What can you tell us on how it developed, and particularly its views on this sort of proposals as the one you were describing? How do you see this coming into effect in the coming years?
Yeah, well, I actually placed this before the Permanent Forum last year at its second session, which was held at UN headquarters in New York. And so it did find favor with the Permanent Forum last year, and it did find its way into the report of the Permanent Forum last year. So basically what I was doing at this third session of the forum, was reiterating the proposal that was made last year and calling upon all of the delegates to the forum and all of the member states of the United Nations to support this recommendation, because the forum has already recommended that this should be done. And the forum has already recommended that this should be done, but this will call for a resolution of the United Nations General Assembly, and that will call for a campaign. There's going to be resistance to this idea by the former enslaver nations. So I was really rallying support for the recommendation and saying to member nations of the United Nations that we are going to have to rally around this idea and do the advocacy work to actually be able to get a resolution passed at the United Nations General Assembly. It's the United Nations General Assembly that would have to establish such a special tribunal. So we have commenced upon a process, but of course there's still some ways to go.
So thank you, David, for your time here in From the South. It has been very insightful to be able to follow this topic. We'll be looking forward to new topics on the. Thank you for being here.